topics are themed around time and what we should do with it, and the goal of improving it. Usually around this time of year, people are reflecting and making promises. You know, coming up here is when everybody starts making their promises. But as Christians, you know, there are things that are proper to reflect on and good for us to reflect upon. And oftentimes we don't spend enough time reflecting on those things. We reflect on our year, we reflect on the ups and downs of our year, but we don't often reflect on how we've progressed as Christians, and that's something we ought to do. And so we'll spend the next few weeks with just a number of topics along those lines. We'll start this one with the Psalm 90, beginning at verse number 1 through 12, and we'll talk about teach us to number our days. We've talked a little bit about this topic in a sermon, but we'll talk about it tonight, just from the standpoint of looking for ways to improve our living and how we've lived and how we will live in the future. This has got to be the constant walk of a Christian, is constantly reflecting on the things that we've done well as the things that we haven't done well. We want to reinforce the things that we've done well. So it is okay to acknowledge, hey, I've done well in this particular area. That's not to be bragging or saying, look, everything's all good. We want to recognize things that are good so that we keep doing those things that are good. If we've been reading God's Word regularly, then we want to keep reading God's Word regularly. So we ought to recognize that, look, this is an area I've been doing well in. Now, if I haven't been reading God's Word regularly, then maybe I need to look at that and say, okay, that's something I want to shore up. I want to improve upon that. And, you know, I'm not suggesting this become our New Year's resolution. Don't wait till the new year when you find something lacking in your life. Now's always the time to change it. So let's take a look at Psalm number 90 and verse number 1. In the very first topic there, God is our dwelling place is what's being talked about in verses 1 and 2. A prayer, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. So he starts off talking about God has been our dwelling place. What does that even mean? We say God is our dwelling place. Yes.
It's a mental attitude.
In what way?
That we're conscious of God and all that we do and what He wants us to do. I mean, we don't think about Him just on Sundays. We dwell in His world.
So it implies then intent, right? I've taken up residence here. I'm intending to stay right here. It implies that I can depart, but I choose to stay with God. There's some references that even talk about this throughout the Bible. You know, the idea of God from everlasting to everlasting. Obviously, he starts with before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth or the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Starting with that part, the eternity and eternal nature of God. So God existed before what we would call existence existed. In other words, before all of this physical that we see around us and everything that we can observe, as far away as we can observe, before any of that existed, God was. He just always was and always will be. And so that, in a sense, everything exists because of him, so we exist within him. Right? We don't, where is the spiritual realm? We can't go looking for, we can't go looking for a place. The fifth Star Trek movie, they went searching for God, and they surmised he was at the center of the galaxy. And that makes no sense, because, that's one galaxy and a whole lot of galaxies. This is how man thinks, so. God must be somewhere. He's out there. When we talk about going up, where are we talking about? Where is up? We're really thinking out there, right? Always out there. But that's not really the proper way to think about God, because God is spirit, and that implies that the spiritual realm is a physical location within our universe. God made this universe, and he existed already. So that doesn't even make sense when we really think about it, when we analyze what the Bible has to say. Brother Tharp.
It may not, and we realize that, but that's the term the Bible uses a lot.
Yes.
The heavens being the sky we see and the realm where God lives.
Yes. It uses that same term for our sky. It uses the same term for the space where the stars are and the realm where God is. So it gives us that sense. So clearly, though, God is not intending to say, look, you just keep traveling far enough and you'll reach me. Who had that idea? Who took it that literally in the Bible?
The Babylonians?
Yeah,
Babel.
when they were building the Tower of Babel, we're going to build a tower so high we're going to reach God. And, that's taking that very literally. But if that were the case, then we wouldn't have to be changed to go to heaven. We wouldn't have to put on spiritual bodies. But we're told we have to do this. This flesh and corruption can't inherit immortality. It's not possible. Brother Young.
When we say that God is our dwelling place, it's appropriate for us to recognize that there is none of them except God.
Indeed.
None.
Indeed. It really implies there that there's one God. Beyond all of the other references that tell us that explicitly, but there's just that implication. Deuteronomy 33, verse 27, the eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are all the everlasting arms, and he shall thrust out the enemy from before thee, and shall say, destroy them. God is indeed to be our refuge. So the idea is we take refuge, right? That's the idea. We look for refuge. We look for safety in God. If we look for safety outside of God, we're not going to find refuge. That's not going to happen. And then, of course, in Psalm 102, 25 through 27, of old thou hast laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of thy hands. They shall perish, but thou shalt endure. Yea, all of them shall wax old like a garment. As a vesture shalt thou change them, and they shall be changed. But thou art the same, and thy years shall have no end. So again, speaking to the eternal nature of God, and now looking at our lives, that how our lives are connected with God. So this idea of God being our dwelling place, he is, in every sense of the word, intended to be our very anchor in life, you know, where we take up residence. In Acts 17, verses 24 through 28, God that made the world and all things therein. So you can see the parallels on a lot of these, where it goes back and just reasserts who God is. It is the God, again going back to what Brother Young pointed out, the God that made the world and everything therein. And we know here in Acts 17, he's talking to a group that worshipped a variety of gods. You know, by some estimates, there were several hundred gods recognized in this location. They were a bunch of philosophers. They were willing to entertain pretty much anything. And so just that first statement that Paul makes, God that made the world and all things therein, you know, I think when we read that, we don't see the controversy in that statement, but that is a very controversial statement to be making at that point in time, in that location rather. Seeing that he is the Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands. So it talks about God's dwelling place. Man's concept became, well, here's the temple, God is in the temple. He's in the holiest of holies. That's his dwelling. God doesn't dwell in there. Neither is worship with men's hands as though he needeth anything. Seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things, and hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. Now, in that particular statement, again, he really makes an assertion about God's dominion. There's not a God for this region and another God for another region. There's not a God for one nation and another God for another nation. So again, the fact that God made this whole world and has dominion over this whole world and is the one God. And then he goes on and says that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from any one of us. So he's not far from anyone. We can seek God and find him. Now, is that a promise? The way it's stated. That's a certainty. He states it as a certainty. Every single person that ever lived, that lives, that will live, can find God if they seek him. Do we have any problem with that idea? We all believe that. Okay. Because we should. I mean, it's just important. Sometimes we start making up these scenarios. Well, what about this? What about that? But God is telling us every single person that seeks him can find him, will find him. It's a certainty. So if we don't find God, what does that imply? Yes. We haven't searched. What if I say what I have been searching? Yes.
You're searching in the wrong place.
Searching in the wrong place. Why? Why is that likely? This says, if I seek God, I'm going to find him. Yes.
I think a lot of people give up.
They give up.
They're waiting for a sign or, something to happen to make them think, oh, I'm on the right track, or they assume they are already saved.
Yes. I'm going to connect right back with what you said there. Yes.
I think a lot of them are led astray by other people, or in older times, they would make an idol, and so they accepted less than the true God. and they stopped at that point. They didn't continue to seek.
And that's, okay, Brother Young.
Well, Paul did make reference to the fact that those who live within the law, they are subject to the law. Those who live without and outside the law, they will be judged outside the law, pointing to the fact that they have conscience to guide them. So I don't know whether that conscience is related to what God says in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, God put eternity in every one of us. So our desires to find eternity is, we'll say, is built in us according to Ecclesiastes. And that there is a conscience built in us also may help us to search, decide what is good or bad. So I don't know whether that is making reference to God having designed us that way.
Yeah, so, I mean, there is that aspect. I'm going to go back first to what Sister Buttrey said, if I can remember what she said. But just why people haven't found God. Sometimes people, there may be a variety of reasons, but they connect in a particular place. The assertion is that I would make here is based on this. If people are searching for God, they will find God. The problem is there are people who do not recognize when they found God. So do I have that nature that says I'm going to search? Certainly. I can look back on my life and say, well, there was always a search. Now, I never termed it as I'm searching for God. But I was always asking questions and seeking answers for things. This is a natural thing for man. Man looks for answers about the universe. Man looks for answers about his own place in life. These are just common nature things in man, trying to find their own place and purpose. That is a search for God, even if you don't know it. Because that's what it's all about. If you want to know the nature of this universe, that comes back to God. If you want to know your place in this universe, your place in life, your purpose in life, that's all going to come back to God. So even when you don't know it, that's what that is. However, the answers are there. Sometimes we don't recognize it. It's not a question of, well, is God being truthful here that we find him? We find and we reject. Brother Tharp.
And to be well armed in this conversation, you're going to have people, he said, bring up the situations. What about the tribe that was on an island and never had contact with anybody? And still, if they're seeking some kind of a God, they have a conscience, and whether they violate that or not is sin or not, and how God deals with them is his business.
Absolutely.
But if those people have heard about Jesus, then they're under the same constraints as us. I can't speak about them because I don't know enough about the situation.
Right. So that's the thing is it's not a issue of avoiding hypotheticals. It's an issue of hypotheticals are just that, hypotheticals. Do you know of a particular place? If you do, go. I mean,
there is a place, but people are killed if they try to get on this island.
Well, there are places that we are protecting, we're preserving. And as far as being killed, trying to spread the gospel, that can't be our deterrent, can it? I mean, these are all hypotheticals people bring up. Why? Why do people bring up all these hypotheticals? To not deal with the reality of their own situation.
99.99% of the people.
Yeah, what's my situation? What am I dealing with? That's what I want to talk about is here's what are we dealing with? What about you? What about your soul? And you want to point to someone else, let's deal with you first. Do you believe? Are you willing to accept? Are you willing to follow? What people are looking for is the exception that says, well, I can be saved without obeying the gospel. But again, God is right there, even if we choose to reject him. Brother Young, I believe I saw your hand.
Yeah, I mean, today we know that the second biggest religion is Islam after Christianity. So in places like Dubai, Saudi Arabia, if you preach the gospel, you'll be put to death. That's for sure. But yet in the city of Dubai and in Malaysia, in many malls, they already put up the Christmas decoration celebrating Christmas. But however, it's the government that says that we are not going to impose our religion on non-Muslim, but we allow our citizens, not of the Islam faith, to worship their God. So in that sense, which is in a way is good because Christ's birth is celebrated. But then for the people of Saudi Arabia and all those Islamic states, they cannot cross the line. Once they cross the line and be converted, they miss the death.
Well, again, it doesn't mean they can't. It means there's a life-threatening deterrent. But we're all called on to face that. We don't really have to here in this country. So it's very easy for us to talk about it. But we still have to talk about it. It is a reality. You can't read through your Bible without looking at people who were willing to die for the cause of Christ, for the, the Bible is just replete with those people. You read about Stephen, I mean, that is a very powerful case for standing up for conviction and being willing to die for conviction. Peter and John were willing to die for their conviction. You again, sample after example of people willing to die. So again, it's easy for us to say here, but we still must point out that even if our life is on the line, we've got to obey God. Brother Merrick.
Jesus Christ, who died for his beliefs and convictions.
Yeah. He died for our beliefs and convictions.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. So, yeah, when we talk about these other areas where we're not, it should really make us all the more convicted and thankful that we're able to worship God. But maybe if we were told we couldn't, maybe we'd have a little bit more zeal. Maybe it'd be a little easier to fill up a building if people were told that they couldn't worship God. I don't know. Brother Tharp.
There's a core adversity strengthens us. We're told that in the Bible. And when it's too soft, that's like the rich man. It's too easy to fall away. And I think that's what you've seen Christianity in the United States happen. Such a decline, and that's why. And you're absolutely right. If there was adversity, the church would be doing better.
More likely than not.
True adversity, not just this war and Christmas or that. I think those are not what we call adversity. Those are bumps in the road.
Well, again, I get it. No one wants to be ridiculed. But in my life, that's been the biggest adversity I can think of that I've faced as a Christian. At no point did I ever believe my life was in danger because I'm a Christian. That's my reality. But we've got to keep fighting that fight and spreading the gospel as we can within our sphere of influence. And expanding our sphere of influence. That needs to be done as well. So, continuing on, I did want to get the last verse there. In verse 27 it said that we should seek the Lord if haply they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, we are also his offspring. For in him we live, move, and have our being. This is just talking about our total dependence on God. That's what this is saying. Our ability to live is based upon God. Our existence is based upon God. This goes back to what Brother Tharp talked about. And I just like to emphasize how many things in the Bible are an intention. It's not a feeling. It's not passive. You know, when the Bible talks about love, it's not something passive. This is something you intend to do. That's how you can love your enemy. You may not feel good about your enemy. If someone has done you harm, you may not feel good about that. But your intent can still be to love. And so our intent, where we take up refuge, where we dwell, is decided by us. We decide, are we going to live in God, or are we going to live out there in the world? And so it starts, this particular passage starts there. I did not do the previous one. What is it? John 5:5, I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me ye can do nothing. Just emphasizing the final point I was making about Acts 17, that it talks about our complete dependence upon God. Going forward, verses 3 through 10, thou turnest man to destruction, and sayest, return ye children of men, for 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday, when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Thou carriest them away as with a flood. They are as a sleep. In the morning they are like grass, which groweth up. In the morning it flourisheth and groweth up. In the evening it is cut down and withereth. For we are consumed by thine anger, and by thy wrath are we troubled. Thou hast set our iniquities before thee, our secret sins, in the light of thy countenance. For all our days are passed away in thy wrath. We spend our years as a tale that is told. The days of our years are 80 years and 10, and if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. So here he sets up a contrast, right? We've got God, who he starts off talking about the everlasting nature of God, and then how does he describe man?
Bleeding.
What was that?
Bleeding.
Very, very. Just a short time we're here relative to God, right? So sometimes we talk about living a long life. Relative to God, it's not possible. It's always short. Always. Why is this relevant to us? Why do we need to know this? Yes.
Well, I imagine God looking at us and saying, their lives so short, why can't they do the right thing for such a little time? Such a short time, just do the right thing. You know, I made the analogy before. If you just behave for one day, I'll take you to Disneyland. Wouldn't try to behave for one day? Some would still not, but it shows how short our life is, and everything we have is dependent on God. And I like the first line, which I think is probably confusing a little bit. He makes man, where was it? Verse 3.
Thou turnest man to destruction, and sayest, return ye children of men.
And I think that's talking about free will. In other words, he didn't make us do what he wants, and when he sets us free, we tend to destroy ourselves.
But he demonstrates us, he shows us that, and gives us the ability to return.
And wants us to do right.
He wants us to return.
But we tend to destroy ourselves.
So in showing and setting up this contrast and showing us this issue of time, there's something that we should take away from it, and that is we ought to behave ourselves. Now, not some other time. So often people say, well, I'm trying to get my life together. Like we have all the time in the world. Look, our lives are short. And he will conclude, I stopped short of the point that really ought to make us reconsider how we're living. But let's go on this idea. We return to the dust. Of course, making reference to Genesis 3:19. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. Now, we understand, when we die, we decay. There was a cosmologist that talked about us being made of stardust, talking about something completely different, and still yet exactly the same. That there's just nothing significant about us from a biological standpoint. We like to think of ourselves as being something very special. But what made us special is God giving us life, God breathing the breath of life into us. Other than that, God lets us know our place in this universe. We're just dust. Our lives come and go. And after they're gone, we just vanish away. Unless you start thinking about your eternal soul. And that's the point of this, is we've got to start thinking about more than the finite time that we're here, but the eternal part of us. Not the part that's decaying, not the part that has pains, not the part that gets old, but the part that is going to exist beyond these bodies. In Psalm 39, 4-6, Lord, make me to know mine end, and the measure of my days, what it is, that I may know how frail I am. Behold, thou hast made my days as a handbreadth, and mine age is as nothing before thee. Verily, every man at his best state is altogether vanity. Surely every man walketh in a vain show. Surely they are disquieted in vain. He heapeth up riches, and knoweth not who shall gather them. This is us. We're going after all of these things that are going to be left behind, that are not going to go with us, or not going to make us one bit of difference. So why do we do it? Yes.
The things that we do to each other, kill and damage and make other people destitute to gather something that means nothing.
Yeah.
They just don't understand it. That's why make me know my time, make me to know my end. Is if we were just aware of how transient our lives are, we would be nicer to each other.
Yeah.
Because our eternity depends on it. These people want to live forever, and they're living in the first tick of 1 second, and they're blowing it right then and there.
and just motivated by the wrong things. And this isn't to get us down, this is for us to focus ourselves on the proper things. Make sure we're thinking about the right things. Look, we could be thinking about all our bills and how and grow despondent over piling debts and things of that nature. Or we can be looking for ways to make ourselves incredibly wealthy. And we might do that at the expense of God, at the expense of our fellow man, like Brother Tharp was saying, just treat each other horribly. I was having a conversation about the AI race and the companies that are putting tons of money into it and building all of these power plants just for that. Yet, when we have power outages, I'm thinking, oh, we always had the ability to solve that. We could have done something about that. There was no money in it. But people are motivated by that. So we have to remember to keep our focus on the right thing. Life is fragile and brief. Man that is born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow and continueth not. That's Job 14, 1 and 2. As for man, his days are as grass. Psalm 103, 15 and 16. As for man, his days are as grass, as a flower of the field, so he flourisheth. For the wind passes over it, and it is gone, and the place thereof shall know it no more. And also Hebrews 9, verse 27. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this, the judgment. All of these are reminders of what our lives are. They're brief, they will come to an end. This is planned for each and every man. Again, the idea is not to be despondent over this. It's not to say, well, what's the use? This is all a waste. It is rather to get us to focus upon the things that really matter. Yes?
Well, it is to get us to say, what a waste. That all these efforts that we see people making are useless. Now, we know we have to do enough to take care of our family, eat, and things like that, but there are people out there who just, every effort is to gather this stuff together. All that we're told here is to make us realize they're going after the wrong thing.
Yes.
They're running the wrong direction. We're supposed to be running that way, and they're all running this way. And so, though it can seem gloomy, it should open our eyes and give us tremendous hope.
Yes. Yeah, and when I mentioned that and said it's not meant to say what a waste, our lives aren't meant to be looked at as a waste, but it's a matter of what we do with them and where our focus is. But you're right, when we're looking from the other perspective, when we're looking at what man's pursuits often are, that's just a waste, and we need to see that. And that's what this is spelling out. And that's the point of this whole thing. It's to say, look, none of this is meant to be gloomy as it sounds. It is meant to be something that focuses us. Take a look at Psalm 90, verse 11 and 12. Who knoweth the power of thine anger? Even according to thy fear, so is thy wrath. So teach us to number our days. So he says, so teach us. Because of this, teach us something. Teach us to number our days. Now, when we talk about numbering our days and looking at our end, that's usually a gloomy conversation. But that's not what he's doing here. This is a prayer. Teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. See, our text closes with the idea of something positive coming out of it. I'm going to number my days. I'm going to recognize that my days are limited. Therefore, what I live for ought to be wisdom, the wisdom of God. That's what he's letting us know in all of this. So in numbering our days, Ephesians 5, we looked at this a few weeks ago, Ephesians 5, verse number 15. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. We had looked at how that's talking about taking back the time. Why? Because normally it's spent in evil. It's normally evil is out there. Normally that's what we're going to waste it. We're going to be part of that evil. The idea is to take back that time, not spend our time in that way. So if we're going to look at things at a close of a year because we commonly reflect, this is the type of reflection we want to have. One that's going to make us look to something that's going to be positive, look to something that is going to benefit our lives, allow us to actually grow. Taking stock of our lives, taking stock of the limited nature of our time can be a good thing. Instead of waiting around until we get our lives together, or saying, well, look, I'm young, I can wait until I get older to devote myself to God. I can spend time now having fun. That's a lot of the concept that goes on. Is that an unnatural idea? Or is it we understand it, right? We understand where that comes from. It comes from not really understanding the nature of your own life. Not understanding verse number 11, who knoweth the power of thine anger, even according to thy fear, so is wrath, so teach us to number our days. Look, our lives could end at any point in time. So if you're young and you understand the nature of sin, I was asked about baptizing people who are young. If they understand that they have sin, and they understand that Jesus Christ died for their sin, that they need to be redeemed, then they are ready to be baptized. We can't play games with other people's lives. If they understand that, some people say, well, they're too young to make that commitment. If they understand, then they're ready to respond. That was the case even under the law. Who was to come out for the reading of the law? Does anyone remember? Who was called to come out for the reading of the law every year? Yes.
Once you reach 5 years old, the fathers would take the boys to listen.
And by tradition, that was stated. What does the Bible say about it? All who could understand.
Yeah.
Now, you're right, by tradition, that's largely the pattern that was followed. But God says, all that could understand. Now, if you demonstrate an understanding, I'm not going to prevent you from being baptized if you want to be baptized. That would be ridiculous. I'd be playing a very dangerous game with someone else's soul. So we need to take our lives very seriously. Not just counting years, but making days count. That's a reference I'd heard once. We sometimes feel like every year that passes by, we're getting older. Sometimes we start dreading the coming of a new year because it means we're getting older. But not too many people want the alternative, which is to, the one way to stop getting older is to stop living. So if you keep living, you're going to keep getting older. That's the nature of it. But instead of just counting the number of years you've lived, start making your time here count. Start making it make a difference. It says in James 4, verse 13, "Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow, we will go into such a city and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, and then vanish away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that." John chapter 9, verse number 4. "I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work." Christ himself gives us guidance in this idea of now is the time to make a difference. Now is the time to get to work. So as we look at this closing of the year and the days that are coming up and where man will be, a lot of people will focus their attention in the coming week on feasts, feeding themselves. They will focus their attention on sales, purchasing things for themselves. Christmas, what gift am I going to receive? New Year, what party am I going to attend? This is how a lot of people in the world close out the year. And of course, we take some time to reflect on the year, but it's usually in the sense of the achievements we've have. But there's one very common thing that you'll see in papers and online, and that is lists of people that have passed away. We usually will reflect on that. I just found out someone I worked with in the 90s just passed away from cancer. And so someone else was talking about doing something now. And that particular person had written just yesterday or 2 days ago, about the fact that they've reached the end. So they wrote something about it. And so it's a lot of people that I worked with are now talking about it. It was someone I directly, when I was hired at that company, was working for, or meant to work for. We tend to look at things after people pass away and we remember them. But how do we remember them? What is it that we usually look at? We like to reflect on their accomplishments, right? All the things they did. That's usually, when you read those lists of things of people who passed away, actor, they got this award, or they starred in this movie, singer, same thing, usually famous people, president, they did this, that, or the other. We look at their accomplishments. Is that a bad thing? Yes.
Well, it's not going to be the thing God's looking at. It should say he was a good husband, he was a good father, he was kind to people, he didn't kick the dog, he attended church. Those are the things. How our character is what God counts about.
So
not how many sales awards we got.
So it's good to look at the accomplishments of someone. We're just looking at the wrong thing. It would be good to look at those positive attributes. We just need to focus while we have our lives on pursuing the right thing. With that, we'll close. We'll continue on. It'll be a different topic each night, but along this kind of a common thread. Hopefully, prayerfully getting us to focus our lives on looking at the right thing to do and the right way to live right now while we have lives. We'll continue on now with a couple of songs. Thank you for your